drinking water are growing in North Korea, and 10% of all children suffer from diarrhea due to drinking polluted water.
When North Korea thinks it's living in full secrecy, it's not. The world knows exactly what's going on with its resources, specifically the decline of its freshwater resources. By now, and a few years prior, North Koreans are suffering from several kinds of losses and shortages because of this dire situation. But how terrible is the current water condition in this isolated nation? A natural resource under pressure. Water is often taken for granted. Turn on a faucet, and it's there. But in North Korea, fresh water is a lifeline that's becoming harder and harder to find. The country is quietly facing a serious crisis. Its freshwater sources are shrinking, degrading, or becoming too polluted to use. Unlike dramatic political headlines, this issue rarely makes the news, but its effects are deeply felt by the people on the ground. From rivers drying up to villages relying on contaminated wells, the availability of clean, usable water is declining year by year. In a country already under immense pressure from sanctions, poor infrastructure, and food shortages, water scarcity adds another layer of hardship to daily life. North Korea isn't a desert, but it's not overflowing with water either. The country has several key rivers, like the Yalu River, which borders China, and the Taedong River, which runs through Pyongyang, along with lakes, reservoirs, and underground aquifers. However, much of its water system has been under pressure for decades. One of the major problems began after the devastating famine of the 90s, often referred to as the arduous march. During that time, desperate citizens began chopping down trees for firewood or clearing forests for small-scale farming in mountainous areas. This led to rapid deforestation across large swaths of the country. With trees gone, the land could no longer retain water effectively. Rain would rush downhill, carrying away topsoil and filling rivers and reservoirs with sediment. This made many rivers shallower, muddier, and less reliable. Springs and smaller streams began to dry up completely. In normal conditions, forests act like natural sponges, absorbing rain, filtering it, and slowly releasing it into groundwater systems. Without them, the natural water cycle broke down, and the loss of tree cover contributed to a severe imbalance in how water moved through the environment. Layered on top of environmental degradation is the growing threat of climate change. North Korea has been hit hard by increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. Summers are becoming hotter and drier, and winters are colder, which leads to snow rather than rain in some regions, further reducing water available for agriculture. Droughts have become more frequent and prolonged, with recent severe ones occurring in 2015, 2019, and again in the early 2020s. These dry spells reduce river levels, empty reservoirs, and devastate crops that depend on reliable irrigation. But it's not just drought. Climate change also means that when rain does come, it often comes all at once, causing flash floods that destroy roads, bridges, and irrigation channels. Floods also increase the risk of water contamination, as waste from broken sewage systems and industrial runoff enters rivers and streams. This creates a cycle where water is either too scarce or too dirty to use, leaving little room for recovery between disasters. Climate models suggest that things will only get worse in the future, with North Korea becoming more vulnerable to extreme weather due to its poor adaptive capacity. Water infrastructure, outdated and broken. The water crisis isn't just about nature, it's also about systems. Much of North Korea's water infrastructure is decades old, built with help from Soviet-era technology or early Chinese aid. Over the years, this infrastructure has fallen into disrepair due to lack of investment, sanctions limiting access to materials, and a general shortage of technical expertise. Pipes are rusted or broken, water treatment plants are few and poorly maintained, and pumps often stop working due to power outages or fuel shortages. In cities like Pyongyang, residents report that water sometimes only runs for a few hours a day. In rural villages, people often rely on hand-dug wells, small streams, or even rainwater collection. But during dry seasons, these options dry up, literally. Without functioning pumps or irrigation systems, agriculture suffers as well. Farmers can't grow rice or vegetables without reliable water access, leading to even greater food insecurity. In essence, when infrastructure fails, everything else begins to crumble around it. Water pollution. Even when water is available, it's not always safe. Pollution is a major and growing concern in North Korea. Industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and untreated sewage often flow directly into rivers and streams. This is partly because the country lacks proper filtration and treatment systems, and partly because factories and farms are desperate to keep production going by any means necessary. Without environmental regulations or enforcement, pollution goes unchecked. In rural areas, people often drink from unfiltered sources like rivers or shallow wells, even when the water is visibly dirty or smells bad. This leads to outbreaks of waterborne diseases, including dysentery, typhoid, and hepatitis. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable. During times of flooding, latrines and septic systems overflow into water sources, further spreading disease. Clean water is the foundation of good public health, and when it disappears or becomes dangerous, the entire population suffers, especially those with the least power and the fewest resources to adapt. Is the country short of clean water to drink? Water is essential to life, and access to clean drinking water is a basic human right. But in North Korea, this right remains elusive for millions. While much of the world has made significant strides in improving water access and sanitation, North Korea remains stuck in a state of chronic water insecurity. The drinking water situation in the country is dire, shaped by outdated infrastructure, environmental degradation, pollution, and deep political isolation. For the average North Korean, getting clean, safe drinking water is not a guarantee. It's a daily challenge. One of the primary issues facing the drinking water system in North Korea is the country's aging infrastructure. Much of the water distribution and purification systems date back to the mid-20th century, with minimal upgrades since then. Water pipes are corroded, leaking, or completely broken in many areas, especially outside of major cities. In Pyongyang, the capital, water availability is better, but still not consistent. Residents often report that water runs for only a few hours a day and must be stored in large tanks or containers for later use. In rural areas, the situation is far worse. Many villages rely on hand-dug wells, rivers, or spring water, none of which are treated or reliably safe. Water quality is another major concern. Even when water is available, it's often contaminated. North Korea lacks a comprehensive sewage treatment system, especially in rural regions. As a result, human and animal waste often seep into rivers and underground water sources. Industrial pollution is also a problem, as factories discharge untreated chemicals and waste directly into nearby waterways. Agricultural runoff, including pesticides and fertilizers, further contaminates drinking sources. The result is that many people are forced to consume water that is unsafe, leading to a high incidence of waterborne illnesses such as diarrhea, hepatitis, dysentery, and parasitic infections. Natural disasters and environmental degradation also play a significant role in worsening the drinking water situation. Floods, which are common in the summer due to heavy rains and typhoons, wash contaminants into water sources and damage infrastructure. On the flip side, droughts reduce the availability of surface water and cause wells to dry up. The country's deforestation, caused in part by desperate logging for fuel and farmland, has also disrupted the natural water cycle. Without tree cover, rain runs off quickly instead of seeping into the ground, reducing groundwater recharge and drying out springs and wells. These environmental changes have made water sources more unstable and less reliable over time. The government has made some efforts to address the issue, but progress has been limited. In official state media, projects like new water treatment plants or reservoirs are occasionally promoted as signs of development and self-reliance. However, these initiatives tend to be small in scale and mostly serve elite areas, such as government institutions and military facilities. The broader population, especially those living in remote or mountainous regions, rarely benefits from such improvements. Additionally, The lack of transparency makes it difficult to assess how effective these projects really are. International organizations like UNICEF and the Red Cross have attempted to help by installing water pumps and sanitation facilities in some communities, but their access is restricted and closely monitored by the North Korean authorities. Another challenge is the lack of public awareness and hygiene education. In many rural areas, people drink directly from rivers or stagnant ponds without boiling or filtering the water, either because they lack the means to do so or because they are unaware of the risks. There is also a lack of access to soap, disinfectants, and proper sanitation facilities, which contributes to poor hygiene and the spread of disease. In schools, hospitals, and even some government-run institutions, clean water is not always available, putting vulnerable groups, such as children, the elderly, and the sick, at even greater risk. Despite the bleak outlook, there are signs of resilience. Many North Koreans have developed ways to adapt. Some collect rainwater, while others use basic homemade filters made from charcoal or sand. The black markets, or jangmadang, that emerged during the 90s famine have become important for accessing bottled water, purification tablets, and basic hygiene supplies, though these are often expensive and out of reach for the poorest families. These small-scale solutions highlight the population's creativity and determination to survive, even as the state falls short in providing essential services. The drinking water situation in North Korea reflects a broader humanitarian crisis rooted in political, economic, and environmental challenges. While the world's attention often focuses on North Korea's nuclear program and geopolitical behavior, the more immediate crisis of unsafe drinking water affects millions of ordinary people every single day. Addressing this issue will require not just humanitarian aid, but also structural changes within the country, greater openness, investment in infrastructure, and a commitment to health and sustainability. Until then, clean drinking water will remain out of reach for far too many North Koreans. The NK government. The North Korean government, as expected, does not publicly admit to large-scale problems. Data on water availability, pollution, and health impacts is tightly controlled or completely absent from public view. However, outside observers, satellite imagery, and defector testimonies offer a glimpse into the situation. Occasionally, the regime has made efforts to build small-scale dams, reservoirs, or water collection facilities. These projects are often publicized in state media as signs of progress and self-reliance. Still, these efforts tend to be centralized and uneven. Priority is given to military bases, elite districts in Pyongyang, and state-run agricultural projects. Ordinary citizens, especially those living in remote or mountainous areas, receive little support. There's also a lack of long-term planning. Without the political will to modernize water systems or cooperate with international experts, most government actions are reactive and short-term rather than strategic or sustainable. Is there hope? Despite the bleak situation, there are some small-scale successes. International organizations like UNICEF, the Red Cross, and the World Health Organization have occasionally been granted access to conduct water and sanitation projects. These have included installing hand pumps, building latrines, and setting up water purification systems in rural schools and clinics. While limited in scope, these projects have made a difference for specific communities and shown that targeted aid can work, if allowed. Meanwhile, North Koreans themselves have become incredibly resourceful. The rise of jangmadang, underground markets that sprung up after the 90s famine, has given people access to goods like water filters, bottled water, and basic hygiene products. While this informal system isn't regulated and doesn't reach everyone, it represents a kind of grassroots resilience in the face of state failure. People are finding ways to survive, even when the official systems break down. The future of fresh water in North Korea depends on many factors, some within the country's control and others far beyond it. Reversing deforestation, investing in clean water systems, and adapting to climate change would all help stabilize the situation. But these require cooperation, funding, and a willingness to open up to the outside world, something North Korea's leadership has resisted for decades. Until then, the water crisis will likely continue to worsen. The people who feel it the most, rural farmers, children, elderly citizens, are the least equipped to fight back. And yet, the story isn't entirely hopeless. Small improvements are possible, especially through humanitarian efforts and community adaptation. Water is more than just a natural resource. It's a mirror that reflects how a country manages its people, its priorities, and its future. And right now, North Korea's reflection is cracked, cloudy, and in desperate need of repair. If drinking water is not as promising, what about food conditions? Food security. Food is one of the most basic human needs, but in North Korea, it has long been a source of anxiety, struggle, and even tragedy. Despite being a highly centralized and controlled state, the country has faced chronic food shortages for decades.
The country is currently experiencing a worsening of widespread food shortages.
From the devastating famine of the 90s to present-day supply disruptions and natural disasters, food insecurity remains one of the most pressing and persistent issues facing the North Korean people. The problem is not just about quantity, but access, distribution, and policy, making food both a humanitarian issue and a political one. The root causes of North Korea's food shortage are complex and deeply intertwined with its geography, history, and politics. To begin with, the country is mountainous, with only about 20% of its land suitable for farming. This severely limits the amount of arable land available for crop production. Additionally, the climate is harsh, with long winters and frequent droughts, floods, and typhoons, all of which pose serious risks to agriculture. In recent years, climate change has further intensified weather patterns, leading to more erratic and damaging conditions that reduce harvest yields. Compounding the environmental challenges are decades of economic mismanagement. North Korea's agricultural system is centrally planned, with most land owned by the state and cultivated through collective farming. While this system aligns with the country's ideological foundation of self-reliance, Juche, it has proven inefficient. Farms often lack basic supplies like fertilizer, fuel, and modern machinery. As a result, productivity is low, and much of the country remains stuck in outdated farming methods. Even when there are decent harvests, poor transportation infrastructure and bureaucratic bottlenecks mean food doesn't always reach the people who need it most. One of the darkest chapters in North Korea's history was the famine of the 90s, known internally as the Arduous March. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, North Korea lost its main source of economic support. Combined with poor harvests, floods, and political rigidity, the food supply system broke down. It's estimated that between 240,000 to 3 million people died due to starvation and malnutrition-related causes. This period fundamentally changed the country, not only in terms of demographics and health, but also in how people accessed food. It gave rise to informal markets, known as jangmadang, where people began trading privately for survival, sometimes even smuggling food across the border with China. Today, food insecurity remains widespread, though not at the levels seen during the famine. The government maintains a public distribution system, PDS, that is supposed to provide rations to every citizen. However, in practice, this system has become unreliable and uneven. In urban areas and among elite groups, rations may still arrive, but in rural regions and for ordinary workers, rations are irregular or insufficient. Most people rely on private plots, local markets, or informal networks to feed themselves. The emergence of the jangmadang has become a lifeline, but it's not a substitute for a stable national food system. Sanctions have also played a role in worsening the food situation. While international sanctions are aimed at curbing North Korea's nuclear weapons program, they also indirectly impact agriculture by limiting access to fuel, machinery, and agricultural chemicals. Humanitarian exemptions exist, but the overall chilling effect makes aid delivery slow and bureaucratically complicated. In some years, the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations have been able to deliver food aid, especially to vulnerable populations like children and pregnant women. However, access to the country is limited, and aid workers are often tightly controlled by the government, making monitoring and transparency difficult. The COVID-19 pandemic made things even worse. In early 2020, North Korea sealed its borders entirely.
North Korea continues to claim there are 0 cases of COVID-19 within its tightly sealed borders,
cutting off nearly all trade, including with its closest ally, China. This strict lockdown affected the flow of food, fertilizers, and even basic goods. With supply chains disrupted, food prices in local markets soared. Reports from defectors and satellite imagery indicated that the agricultural sector suffered due to a lack of imports and labor shortages. The isolation aimed to prevent the spread of the virus, but it came at the cost of increasing hunger and economic hardship for millions. Food insecurity also has long-term impacts on public health. Chronic malnutrition is a serious concern, especially among children. According to UN data, around 1 in 5 North Korean children under 5 are stunted due to malnutrition. Poor diets lead to weakened immune systems, lower academic performance, and increased vulnerability to disease. For pregnant women and the elderly, the effects of limited access to nutritious food can be even more dangerous. These health consequences ripple through generations, keeping the cycle of poverty and underdevelopment alive. Despite all these challenges, the North Korean government continues to frame food as a political issue rather than a humanitarian one. State media regularly announces record harvests and agricultural successes, even when evidence suggests otherwise. During national holidays or military parades, food abundance is portrayed symbolically. Rows of fruits, vegetables, and bread displayed for the cameras. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the country, families are rationing rice, substituting wild grasses for meals, or skipping meals altogether. The propaganda machine paints a picture of strength and self-reliance, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. Looking ahead, the prospects for solving North Korea's food crisis remain uncertain. Improvements would require structural reforms, investment in agricultural technology, climate adaptation, and better cooperation with international organizations. However, political priorities continue to favor military development and regime stability over food security. While the country has shown occasional openness to aid and economic reforms, these moments are often short-lived and heavily restricted. Food shortage and insecurity in North Korea are not simply the result of bad weather or unfortunate geography. They stem from deeper systemic issues: ideological rigidity, economic mismanagement, international isolation, and a lack of transparency. As long as these root causes persist, millions of North Koreans will continue to live with uncertainty about their next meal. While the world often focuses on the nuclear issue, the quieter, daily crisis of hunger is just as urgent and deserves far more attention. Where do the citizens actually get the majority of their food for their tables? Despite all the secrecy surrounding the country, we actually know a fair amount about what North Koreans eat and where their food comes from. And while it's not always enough, they've developed a mix of traditional staples, state-run farming, and informal survival strategies to keep food on the table, at least most of the time. The backbone of North Korea's diet is rice and corn. These two crops are the most widely grown and consumed in the country. In the south and southwest, where the climate is a little milder and the land flatter, rice paddies are common. But in the north and more mountainous areas, corn is more practical because it's easier to grow in rough terrain. Corn is often ground into flour and used to make porridge, steamed buns, or noodles. Rice, when available, is usually saved for special occasions or mixed with corn to stretch it further. Besides rice and corn, potatoes are another major staple, especially in colder areas like Ryanggang and North Hamgyong provinces. After the 90s famine, the government actually pushed for more potato farming as a way to deal with food shortages. Potatoes are hardy and grow well in poor soil, so they've become a key part of the average diet. You'll often find them boiled, steamed, or turned into flat cakes. Sweet potatoes are also fairly common, especially in the fall. Vegetables play a big role in North Korean meals, but availability depends a lot on the season and region. Cabbage, radishes, and spinach are typical, especially in the form of kimchi, the famous fermented side dish. North Koreans make huge batches of kimchi in the fall to last through the winter, since fresh produce is hard to come by in the colder months. Other common vegetables include squash, beans, garlic, and leeks. Most are grown in small private gardens or on state farms, but people often pick wild greens from the hills and forests to supplement their meals. When it comes to protein, options are more limited. Meat is expensive and often reserved for holidays, weddings, or gifts from the government or employers. Pork is the most commonly eaten meat, followed by chicken and duck in some areas. Beef is rare, partly because cattle are more valuable as work animals. Fish is more accessible in coastal areas, and freshwater fish, like carp, are sometimes farmed in rivers or ponds. However, for many families, soybeans are the go-to protein source. Soy is used to make tofu, soy sauce, and soybean paste, essential ingredients in soups and stews. Fruits are seasonal and usually come from homegrown trees or local markets. Apples, pears, and persimmons are the most common, and in the summer, people eat watermelons and peaches when available. However, fresh fruit isn't an everyday item for most families. Dried fruits or pickled versions are often used to make food last longer, especially during the winter. One unique part of North Korea's food system is the jangmadang, or informal markets. These markets popped up during the 90s famine and have since become a crucial part of daily life. People buy and sell everything from rice and vegetables to snacks and street food. These markets often provide better food access than the state-run distribution system, which is unreliable and sometimes completely non-functional in poorer or rural areas. The jangmadang are a lifeline for many North Koreans, and they've helped create more food variety and flexibility, even if it means paying higher prices. On top of this, foraging is a common way to find extra food, especially in the countryside. People collect wild plants, mushrooms, and even insects during tough times. Some of this foraging is traditional, but during shortages, it can become a matter of survival. In extreme cases, families turn to substitutes like corn husks or tree bark to bulk up meals when real food is scarce. In recent years, the government has tried to boost food production through military-run farms and state-managed agricultural projects. While these efforts are meant to improve food security, they don't always succeed due to poor planning, outdated farming equipment, and bad weather. Some areas see decent harvests, while others face regular shortages. Distribution is also uneven. Urban areas like Pyongyang often receive better supplies than rural villages. North Korea's major food sources are a mix of grains like rice, corn, and potatoes, plus seasonal vegetables, small amounts of meat and fish, and what people can grow, trade, or find on their own. The average North Korean doesn't have a lot of variety in their meals, and getting enough to eat isn't always easy. But over time, people have developed ways to adapt. Through markets, foraging, and home gardens, it's a complex system, shaped by geography, politics, and resilience, with every bite earned through effort and resourcefulness. Moving forward. Water is essential for life, yet in North Korea, it remains fragile and unevenly distributed. The country's outdated infrastructure, built decades ago with foreign aid, now suffers from poor maintenance, with leaking pipes, broken pumps, and unsafe reservoirs. Rural areas often rely on untreated wells and rivers. A major hurdle is the government's prioritization of military and political projects over essential public services, resulting in limited investment and modernization of the water system. Additionally, water pollution from factories, agriculture, and sewage poses serious health risks, especially to vulnerable groups. Climate change adds further stress, with more frequent droughts and floods damaging already weak infrastructure and contaminating supplies. Without long-term planning and outside support, North Korea's water system faces ongoing decline. While some small-scale projects exist, meaningful progress will depend on major policy shifts and sustainable investment. The future of water in North Korea remains deeply uncertain and increasingly urgent. Despite these challenges, there are still opportunities for improvement if the political will exists. One path forward could be small-scale, community-based water systems. In rural areas, Installing hand pumps, rainwater harvesting systems, or small filtration units could provide more stable and safe access to water. International organizations like UNICEF and the Red Cross have already worked on such projects, with some success. However, strict government controls and restrictions on foreign aid make it difficult to scale these efforts. Another potential solution lies in embracing green technology and modern water management techniques. Solar-powered water pumps, drip irrigation systems, and low-cost filtration units could all make a significant difference, especially in remote or drought-prone areas. Unfortunately, many of these technologies remain out of reach due to sanctions, funding shortages, and limited access to international knowledge-sharing networks. For North Korea to truly modernize its water infrastructure, it would need to open its doors to cooperation and innovation, something that has proven difficult in the past. The private sector, though small and mostly informal, might also play a role. The rise of jangmadang has already changed how people access food, medicine, and consumer goods. In some areas, bottled water, filters, and hygiene products are now bought and sold on these markets. While this isn't a full solution, it shows that people are finding ways to adapt and survive even as official systems fail. Encouraging small-scale entrepreneurship around clean water solutions could be a way to bridge the gap between state neglect and everyday need. Education and public awareness will also be essential. Many North Koreans, especially in rural communities, lack knowledge about water safety, hygiene, and disease prevention. Government campaigns or international programs that focus on health and sanitation could help reduce water-related illness and make communities more resilient.
The national organization who recently visited North Korea providing humanitarian aid assistance for vulnerable North Korean people.
Even basic changes, like promoting hand washing, boiling water, and protecting water sources from livestock, can have a huge impact on public health. The future of North Korea's water system depends on a range of factors, many of which are political, not just technical. The country needs better infrastructure, cleaner water sources, climate resilience, and more openness to outside support. Without these, the water situation may continue to worsen, putting millions at risk. But if reforms are made and practical, community-based solutions are supported, North Korea could slowly move toward a more secure and sustainable water future. It won't be easy or fast, but access to clean water is a goal worth working toward, no matter the borders or politics. Thanks for watching the video.